Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on episode 6 of The Synergy Show. Can't believe it's already been 6 episodes, but today we have a fantastic guest. I'm going to briefly read his bio here. So I have Mr. Matthew Patullo here, who's the founding partner at AP Romano Legal Professional Corporation. It's a law firm. Their practice focuses on all areas of real estate, wills and estates, and corporate law matters. Matthew graduated from the University of Windsor in 2014 with both a Canadian and American dual JD, which is interesting, and I want to ask him some questions about that. He was called to the bar in 2015 and since then has worked with entrepreneurs, first-time buyers, experienced buyers, sellers, investors, realtors, mortgage agents, you name it, the whole 9 yards. So over 10 years in the industry, we're going to pick his brain in terms of why he decided to go the entrepreneurship route and, try to get some information out of him that will help us all with our businesses. So first of all, Matthew, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks
How
for
are you
having
today?
me here. I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing amazing. So I want to just start off this podcast with this question. Why legal entrepreneurship? Why not go down the traditional law route?
You know what? For me personally, I always felt that I had that little bit of entrepreneurial element to me. I mean, when I was really young, I would just start working. And actually, the first time I got into something entrepreneurial, we were doing something called palletizing, which was a really good part-time job while you're in university. Because most people working minimum wage at the time was probably about $8 an hour. And if you worked hard, this was a piecework job, you could make up to $30 an hour, which at the time we were saying this is fantastic. And at one point, one of the warehouse managers said to my friend and I really like how you guys work. You guys are doing great work, but your boss is non-responsive. We're having a hard time dealing with him. It's too bad you guys don't have your own company. So me and him looked at each other and then we said, why don't we start our own company? And the next thing you knew, we started picking up all these contracts. We started, expanding outwards, and then, really just to have that kind of control, I guess, about, the service you give to people. The ability that the harder you work, you're going to benefit from it and not someone else necessarily. And then it's almost addictive because once you see, the power of entrepreneurship or just the kind of lifestyle associated with it even, it starts to kind of get your mind working that, any setup in that nature is probably preferable to working for someone.
So, let's go down your journey as a legal entrepreneur. Was there a particular moment when you made that shift or when you had that change in mindset where I'm going to pursue this on my own rather than go down the traditional route?
Yeah, I mean, when I started to work for someone. You want to get your feet wet a little bit. You don't want to just kind of get thrown into the fire, make mistakes, because you're playing with people's lives or their livelihood. So I did start working there, and then just after a while, you realize, A, you're making other people a lot more money. B, you don't really get that creative freedom. So for me, when it kind of hit me was when I wanted to give discounts to some of my friends because I felt that the lawyer I was working for charged a little bit too much. And he said, absolutely not. And I wanted to go sign up clients at night. I said, you don't have to pay me anything extra. I just want to build a client base. And he wouldn't let me do that either. And so just constantly getting shot down with, these ideas or this concept of what I thought a real estate lawyer should do or should be, I realized the only way I was going to get to implement that was being on my own.
Right. And you know what? For most people, that's okay. Like being shot down, they don't think about, oh, I could probably do this differently. But in your head, the gears were probably turning like, I could probably do this differently. I could probably do it better. Yeah. Was there a little bit of that notion of being able to do it better than who you worked for?
Absolutely. I think for me, I feel like some of the lawyers who had started in a different era, times were a little bit different, I guess, before the internet. But we're in a day and age now where people expect good customer service. They want things done quickly. They expect flexibility. And I mean, there's certain developments later that came. So for example, the ability to virtually sign clients, definitely a big game changer for a lot of clients themselves and for us as well. But I just feel like some of those lawyers just figured, I did this once, this is what works, this is what's always going to work. But we live in a world where things are always changing really quickly. So
I feel like it's such a dinosaur industry sometimes, right? So averse to change or any type of change and always done this singular way that it's been done for the last 20, 30 years. And then when somebody else comes around and does things differently, it kind of takes the market by storm. And I've seen like a lot of people in the legal industry, their business has grown massively ever since e-signing came in. How long have you been operating AP Romano now? How many years has it been?
Yeah, it's been about 5 years now. It's been in
5 years. So just pre-COVID, I guess you would say.
Yeah.
Have you noticed any significant changes in the way you operate your business since the beginning to now?
Absolutely. Before we were allowed the virtual signings, when I was getting things going, I was very much on the client focused portion of giving good customer service. And so I would jump in my car and drive to anywhere, even if it was a few hours away. I remember one time I had just gotten back from Europe. I jumped in a car. I didn't even get to sleep. I shot over to sign up a client in Waterloo. I came back, got the file done for the night. It was crazy. It was crazy before, but now with that document signing, I've been able to, lower prices a little bit because it is a little bit less for me to travel. So I figured reflect that on what your clients are paying.
Yeah.
Also, it's been good in the sense that a lot more clients are more receptive to it because they can be in their living room eating dinner, call me, we finish, we wrap up, they're already at home, they don't have to go anywhere, they don't have to get ready. And yeah, it's just kind of made the workflow a little bit better so you can handle bigger volumes of files and transactions for sure.
So going to more of a virtual model now, have you had to make any key changes in the way you conduct your business outside of, the customer aspect of things?
Yeah, I mean, things are always changing in that regard. I mean, when we started with the virtual signing, we didn't have to do third-party ID verification. They brought that in January of this year. So sometimes it creates difficulties with a little bit of the older clients if they're not able to get their selfie in the camera, or if their ID, sometimes if they have a middle name that's not on another document, it will shoot it back. So there's a lot of troubleshooting and things in that regard. But on the flip side, it has been, something that younger clients or even some older clients that are tech savvy have kind of embraced.
Right. So it's just about adapting to each client situation, figuring out a solution there. Let's talk about the first 6 to 12 months of you being an entrepreneur, a legal entrepreneur, I should say. What were some of the biggest challenges you faced early on in your entrepreneurship career?
Well, I mean, once you've taken on any kind of financial responsibility, whether it's car payments, rent, mortgage, anything really, when you're working for someone or you're on a salary, you're so used to having X amount of dollars come in, I have to pay X amount of dollars, and there's that certainty. So there's not really ever a time where you feel, I might not be able to pay my bills this week. And obviously right when you start, that's all gone. So you really don't know. And the thing too is, when you're working for someone, if I show up at this address and I put in this much time, I'm going to make this much money. But once you're an entrepreneur, I can't even tell you what my next client's name is. I don't know who they are. I don't know where they are. They exist because obviously, business will keep going on, but there's just that whole element of uncertainty, right? So yeah, at the beginning it's a little tough, but I had been kind of planning a little bit for it in advance. I tried to put away a little bit of money. I tried to make a couple of investments with passive income just so I had something, but it was definitely not enough for my lifestyle, what I was generating from that. So it was a little bit of a leap of faith, but it also kind of puts you into the fire where you say, okay, you know what, I need to figure this out or else I'm in trouble, right?
The pressure kind of gets you,
yeah,
like you have to make it work.
Yeah.
There's no plan B, right? Who's going to pay my bills? Not nobody else but me. So, early on in your career, what were some of the strategies that you used to attract clients or attract business to yourself? Obviously, you're competing with larger firms, even singular firms that are just more established, that have an existing client base. I think you're now 5 years into your law career, so you have some experience under your belt. But what were you doing early on in your journey to attract clients and business towards yourself?
Yeah, well, at the beginning, you just want to get business however you can. I definitely will say that from when I started, my own practice to now, my mentality shifted a little bit. But I mean, what I was doing at the beginning was I would do tons of free consultations. I used so much time talking to people who, might not even appreciate it, might not even come to you at the end of all your conversations with them. I would drive to everybody, as I was saying. I would jump in my car. I said, "Don't worry, you're in Waterloo. I'll come. Don't worry about it." And obviously, try to be super competitive with the pricing, just to bring in business. But then, as you start to grow, as your volumes increase, you realize, okay, some people are not going to respect your time no matter what you do. So you have to start making those boundaries, or else you're just going to be spinning your wheels for everyone. You also start to realize that you are providing value because you start to build more of a brand based on your reputation, or your capabilities, and not so much on, I'm the cheapest price. Now, obviously pricing is relevant.
Yeah.
It's a very competitive market now. I think the number of lawyers per capita has gone up significantly in the last 10, 20 years, right? So definitely a lot of competition, but that doesn't mean you need to give away your services for free, right?
Exactly. It's just about knowing what you're worth.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of entrepreneurs face this, like even myself in my journey early on, it's like you'll take anything you can get. But as you get more experience under your belt, as you've made a little bit more money, you've had more clients, then you start to pick and choose who you want to work with. And I think when that happens, that's one of the best moments in your entrepreneurship journey, right? Where you're like, okay, I don't need to take this. And if I don't take this, I'll be fine. I can just choose who I want to work with. And I think that actually ends up making you a better business owner down the line, because you're more selective who you work with, and that selectivity, or being more selective with who you're going to work with, results in better service. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because I do think that your workflow is important. And workflow is, I'm using it as a very broad term. It's referring to A, your relationship between you and your staff, B, the relationship between your staff and your clients, and C, whether or not those clients are allowing you to execute at, a high volume basis, or to provide good results. And, obviously every client is different. Some clients want to talk a little more. Some clients want their hands held a little bit more, which is not a problem. I mean, I think where you draw the boundary is respect. Like, I won't let anyone disrespect my staff. I say, even if you want to talk to them a certain way, make sure you're respectful. I mean, I'm going to take their side all the time because we have something going there. We're going to make sure that, we're able to get all the files done for everybody. We're going to do a good job. But disrespect, you can't take that. And some people, I mean, even in the beginning, I would take a little bit more disrespect. And later I just realized, I don't need to be disrespected, right?
Exactly.
But for the most part, people are not too bad with that. It's just...
Yeah, I think most people are good people, right?
Yeah.
You run into the occasional bad apple, but most people are not being disrespectful.
Correct.
I mean, I can count on one hand the number of people that have disrespected me in my 5 years as a realtor. Yeah. Not that many, and I'm struggling to think of their names. So I like to think, I like to be positive and think most people are going to treat you with respect and respect you for your knowledge, your expertise, and what you've put into the industry. Speaking about staff, how many staff do you have now?
So we have 2 full-time law clerks that work for us. I've got a business partner that she does personal injury and family law agreements, things like that. And then I have a paralegal that works with me for my landlord-tenant stuff, and then another paralegal that will help me with some enforcement, some mortgage enforcement, things like that, just helping me put together the packages for
Amazing. So you guys cover a wide variety of different fields in the legal industry, and you can help with people with a lot of different things. Let's talk a little bit about, going from a sole practitioner to more, well, you're still a sole practitioner in the sense, but going from a solo lawyer, I should say, where I'm sure when you first started your journey, you were just working by yourself.
Yeah.
You probably didn't have a law clerk at the beginning.
No.
Talk about that shift in from being just a lawyer to now playing more roles and being a manager, being a business owner, being a mentor in some cases, a coach, and all these other things that, all these other roles that you have to play as a business owner.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely so. Obviously, when you're starting on your own, you're not worried about managing expectations. You're not worried about, the quality of service you deliver because it's all in your hand and all that. But from previous businesses that I had owned prior to having my own law firm, I do know that being an employee at some point, the kind of triggers or motivating things that will keep your employees on task. or keep them motivated to keep working with you, right? And I know because when I was working somewhere else, there were a few things that I wasn't happy with, and I felt like the employer didn't care. And you saw it in even the other staff where the productivity just fell right off. So I think you kind of got to look at it as a team. And so I played sports, a sports background, the guys who would go and yell at the players like, what are you doing? Why did you shoot the ball out of bounds, or whatever it was? And they're demeaning to them. Those players would start to resent them, and you'd have kind of a loss of that team chemistry. But if you're reassuring, say, look, next time, can you try to send it this way? I'll move this way. Let's talk. Let's figure it out. That would have more positive results. And so just being in that kind of an environment, you learn what kind of behaviors are positive or negative for building a team, right?
Right. What are some of the strategies that you're using to keep team chemistry at an all-time high?
I mean, I'm very, very flexible with working arrangements. So I let my staff work from home if they want. I don't expect them to keep any particular hours. I just expect them to get the stuff done on time that they have to. I expect them to answer calls when people are to reach out to them. But otherwise, I'm not a micromanager,
Yeah.
Obviously, that's trust that's earned, because if you have staff that's incapable, then you're going to feel more inclined to look over their shoulder and see what they're doing. But my staff is great, so I don't have to micromanage them as much. I just, I review what I have to as a lawyer. I do the portion of work that I have to be responsible for as a lawyer, but I don't need to make sure that they're upholding their obligations.
Yeah. Do you find that you have to balance between both the administrative and the business side of things in terms of operating your law firm, but at the same time, delivering quality legal service to your clients? Do you find that a challenge at all?
Yeah, it can be a challenge, because I feel like in any business, obviously you have business development, operations, and then, managing the team and all that. It's hard to shift gears sometimes, because, if I'm in a mode where I'm going to be drafting agreements, okay, that's the kind of mode where I just want to be secluded. I want to shut all the doors, turn off all my electronics, just sit there and draft my documents. But if at the same time there's either a client calling you that, needs to speak to you, or if there's, something that needs urgent attention, then you have to get out of that mode really quickly and change your hat, right? So what I personally do that I feel works for me is, throughout the day, I try not to do any of my drafting or anything like that. I try to do that at night, usually when my phones are a little bit more dead, less people calling me, and that's when I'll get my stuff done. But definitely a challenge.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. Let's go back to, your early moments as an entrepreneur. What were some of the other businesses that you operated?
Yeah, so I touched on it a little bit earlier. I did do palletizing, which was basically the 54-foot truck would come into a warehouse full of different goods. Usually it was frozen meats for some reason. Those were a lot of our contracts. And we'd be unloading those onto pallets and shifting them in the warehouse. So we had, my friend and I, when we were approached, we started our own business with that. We started getting contracts. It was very low risk business at the time, because we were both students, so we didn't really have the capital. So we had contracts with the warehouses to pay us a certain amount of money for each load, and we would pay our workers piecework, which worked out better for them because per hour they were getting paid very well, but it also worked out well for us because there was no way we could lose money if we were in a position to lose money, right? So that business went well, and when I got into law school, which was about 2011, he also got into the bank full time, so we folded that business while I was away. And then when I came back, he had gotten into a little bit of solar sales. So when I started talking to him, we found another supplier. We said, why don't we do this? Because at the time, they had government incentives for what was called the microfit program. So we started getting into talks with a supplier manufacturer. At the time, I just finished law school, so that was one of the first things I did with my law degree was make this contract between ourselves and the company.
Yeah.
And I actually saw them using it later, that they took my contract and used it. But anyways, so we set it all up. And then we built out a team of sales agents, and we started prospecting, and we did some door-to-door, which is great. I recommend door-to-door to anybody because it really builds character. You need to get that rejection
for sure
to deal with it. And it went really well. That one ended up having to be stopped because the government incentives expired. So we turned it down. But a lot of that gives you really good experience, and I think it's more of a transferable skill, not necessarily just to law, but these are skills that if you have them, you can start almost any business you're passionate about and probably succeed, right?
You know, I always say if I could go back in time and if I was 18 years old, I would go back and tell my 18-year-old self, go be a car salesman or go door to door knocking and just do some of those, like sell knives or whatever it is they made you sell back in the days.
Yeah.
Because it would just give you so much experience, like such transferable skills, like you said, that can help you in any aspect of your life. So did you do door to door sales?
Oh yeah. And you know what? It's like I said, it's the rejection that you need to embrace it. You need to almost thrive off of it. And I mean, when I was in law school, there was a guy in one of my classes, and he loved that that rejection when he was getting his resume ready for the on-campus interviews. He had another guy look at it and he goes, "Tell me how bad it is." He goes, "Tell me how bad it is." He's like, "You want me to tell you how bad this is?" He goes, "I wouldn't even hire you at McDonald's." And he ripped up and he goes, yes. And he would redo the resume, and just he fed off that energy, and he ended up getting more on-campus interviews than anybody. He got tons of job offers, and so it's just you have to build that thick skin, because not everything is going to be pleasant. And so when you can deal with that kind of rejection, where some people they see someone coming to solicit them for something and they want nothing to do with it, and when you can get told, "Get off my property, go away, get out of here," enough times, you just kind of become resilient, right?
For sure. I bet you that guy's successful today.
Oh, he's doing very well. He's doing very, very well, yeah.
Because I think like that is one of the best skills that you can learn in any industry. Like, as a lawyer, you're not a traditional salesperson, but you're still selling yourself as a lawyer, your legal services, and people are gonna say no to you. People are gonna choose to work with other people for a variety of reasons. But if you let that anchor you down, it's not gonna benefit you in the long run.
No.
And that rejection is so important. Like, in my industry, I think on average I get rejected about 10 to 12 times before I get a successful sale. And most people are quitting after maybe the first rejection or the third rejection or the fourth rejection. But I call my clients 10 to 12 times, and after the 10 to 12th calls, they might not answer every single time, but they'll answer a few times and they'll tell me, I'm not ready, or this isn't the right time. And then there's going to be a time where I catch them at the perfect time. Yeah. It's like all the stars are aligned, and guess what? They're ready to go. Yeah. And I was the person that called them at that time. So it's like, just like that classmate of yours, just appreciating rejection almost. Like it's such a valuable skill. When you were early in your law career, you probably faced rejection plenty of times. How did you get past that?
I mean, you did get rejected. I mean, at first you do have some times when you're just starting where there's maybe self-doubt, where you're like, am I able to do this? Am I capable? Maybe it's not for me. Like, I don't know if this is ultimately what's, where I should be going. And especially if you have, negative people around, or maybe you're in a toxic environment, some of that self-doubt will creep in. But once you kind of just say, you know what, let me give it a go. Let me see how it ends up, and then you realize, I can't do this. It's definitely, It's definitely a perspective shift. But I mean, with anything, you're always gonna have those doubts. It's just about how you manage it and how you overcome it. And rather than sitting there and focusing on the negative, focus on the positive. Like when you were talking to me now about the 12 rejections and the one deal, but you still got the deal. You still got the client.
Exactly.
So where's the negative? The rejections are just in the backdrop because you still achieved your objective, right?
It's so funny because in my industry, the name of the game is following up, like just constantly calling. Like my job is 90% making calls, 10% selling real estate. And early on, it was very difficult for me to like call people, pick up the phone and call people, because I always think I might be bothering them. This is not the right time. What if they're like heading to work? What if, whatever, all this stuff. And then I kind of realized I had to develop a thick skin and I just had to make the call regardless. And now it's almost like I call them and in my head I'm like, I know you're not going to pick up, but it's okay because I'm going to call you right away. I use a CRM system. I set the next follow-up task. 1 week from now, I'm going to call you. I'm going to call you. I'm going to call you. And I'll tell you a crazy story. Earlier this year, we had a client of ours that sold through us, and she called me 2 years ago or 2.5 years ago, 2021. And at the time, I had a listing in Toronto, and she saw one of my signs, and she said, hey, I saw your sign. I'd like you to come by. My father just passed away. We need to sell this house. Could you let me know how much we could get for it? So I go by to her house. I take a look, and turns out they have to go through the whole probate process. Now, long story short, probate ends up taking 2 years because this was COVID and her first lawyer messed up and then second lawyer had to clean up the mess that they did. And I don't know the whole story, but long and short of it is that it took 2 years. During those 2 years, I called her every single month. And after the first 4 or 5 calls, she would start cussing at me when I would call her, like, stop effing calling me, stop effing calling me. And you know what, I tell this story to a lot of people, especially agents on my team, but every time I'd call her, she would start off angry, but then eventually she'd calm down. And I later realized, and she told me herself, was that every time I called her, I reminded her that her probate was still in progress. So she'd take out the anger out on me, but then she'd quickly calm down and then we'd talk and, you know, whatever. It would be fine. So irrespective of that, I kept calling her. Finally, last November, she calls me back. Guess what? Probate's done, but we need to do some renovations. So they do the renovations, I go see her, and then February we list the house. Would you believe this? We sold her house. The buyer that bought her house was a buyer that came in through my own team. So one of the agents on my team brought the buyer. So now we got, out of this one client, 2 transactions. When we listed the house for sale, we did an open house. Out of the open house, we found another buyer that successfully bought a $1.3 million house through us. That same buyer had a property that they want to list for lease in Oshawa. We listed that for lease. We were able to rent it out. While we were walking through that apartment, we found another person that wants to list another condo. It hasn't materialized yet, but they will list with us. So through that one client, we did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 transactions, if I'm not mistaken, and more to follow. And that's the power of just continuously following up, right? The power of like not letting rejection get to you. Most people will just give up after the first time someone says they're not ready or, you know, this isn't the right time. But if you just push through that, you'll get such good results. But I just wanted to share that little bit of the story.
No, it's true. It's even further to what you're saying, because like you just open up the whole network, and that's kind of when you're starting your employment journey. It's when you hit a couple of those seams where I guess there's like a whole chain reaction. That's when things will really start picking up. So that's why it is important to follow up. It is important to give good service. It is important to get yourself out there, because if you're just sitting at home waiting for things to happen to you, it's not going to happen. You have to go out there and you have to get it, right?
Exactly. Early in your career, did you find that, I guess, let me rephrase this question. Early in your entrepreneurship career, when you just started off your law firm after, I guess, 5 years of working for another law firm, and then you went off on your own, what were you doing to differentiate yourself from larger and more established firms?
Yeah, I mean, even from the firm that I was working at, the main thing was I was willing to do signups in the evenings because my firm, the firm that I was working at, was very adamant on people. You come in between 9 and 5. This is your deal. If you care about it, you'll come here. I didn't agree with that mentality. So I told people, I said, look, go to work, finish your work day. I'll sign you up in the evening, whatever's convenient for you, weekends, whatever works. Definitely was more available.
So did they force clients to come in between 9 and 5?
Yeah.
Wow.
Because even back then, that was before you could do the virtual signing. So it had to be done in person. But sometimes I would even offer, I'd say, look, I would go sign up the client in person. I have no issues doing that. And the boss said, absolutely not. It's their deal. If they care, they come in. If they don't, too bad. And I just, you know what? I guess lawyers who got their license before the internet was around, it was different times, right?
That is such a narrow-minded
Oh
approach to
yeah.
business. That's just like taking your money and burning it. You know
Oh
what I
yeah.
mean?
Yeah. And he charged a lot more than, what I thought was a good price because
Yeah.
for me, I'm whenever I start a business of any sort, I like to do a little bit of market research,
Yeah,
okay?
yeah.
And I'm never one to believe that you should be the absolute cheapest because to be the absolute cheapest, you're going to start cutting corners. You're not going to care as much. You're not going to deliver quality services to your clients. But I do think you should be competitive. So I personally believe if you can be in the bottom 33% of pricing, that'll give you the volume. And then if you hit kind of a critical capacity of volume, you can start to raise your price to bring it back in. It's economics 101,
Yeah.
but a lot of lawyers are not business people first, right?
I love that.
And there's a couple things that I find with that, and one is that some lawyers don't have that social element. I actually had a client the other day say to me, anytime you want, you can come by my place. I'm gonna do a barbecue for you. He goes, I had a family law lawyer when I was getting a divorce. I wouldn't say the same thing to him. He's too stuck up. He goes, but you're relatable, and you're someone who I feel like I can just talk to. And I think that comes with, getting yourself out there in those social engagements, right? Because a lot of lawyers just kind of went to undergrad, studied all the time, stayed in, went to law school, studied all the time, stayed in, and now they're a lawyer and they've missed, 7 years of socializing. Whereas for me, I played competitive sports. I would go out to events to meet people. I would definitely focus on socializing and working out and things that kind of, kept me going. And so by doing that, yeah, you become more relatable because you're doing what everyone else is doing. Not everyone is locking themselves away and studying, right?
Yeah, I think, unfortunately, the school system that we have here just forces you to kind of, especially if you want to be a lawyer, forces you to kind of go down that hole where you're not going to have much of a social life. But those social skills are so critical because they help people relate to you and look at you other than just a lawyer, right? Like, I think that's what builds loyalty with your clients. Like, can they relate? Like, good service and results are one thing, but like, who are you as a person? Are you an actual person or are you a robot? And I think that makes a big difference. One thing you mentioned that I wanted to touch on was, lawyers are lawyers first and business people second, or most lawyers. And I think that's also relatable to a lot of people that get into entrepreneurship, right? Usually, most people kind of fall into entrepreneurship, I would say. They're good at a skill or they have a good service and they're selling that service, and then eventually they scale it into a business, right? So what are some things that people should be doing to educate themselves on being a business person first and then a service provider second?
Yeah, I mean, I think whatever business you want to get into, if you want to be an entrepreneur, I believe you need to take a ground up approach. So for example, if it was your desire to own a Tim Hortons franchise, learn how to pour the coffee, learn what temperature the coffee has to be at, learn how they make the muffins, do everything on the ground level, because then when you get into an executive position, you'll have an idea of things that either A, you think are inefficient, and you're not saying it from a perspective of ignorance because you've actually done it. You've actually done the ground level stuff. I think that's important when you're starting that kind of journey. I think the other thing too is, again, make sure that it's something you're passionate about, because if you're not passionate about your business, you're going to be doing that more than you're going to see your family, more than you're going to see your friends. And if it's really bogging you down, it's going to come across on your personality that you're not happy and people are not going to enjoy being around you.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, I think a lot of it too is just, the way you look at business. Like what do you like about business? Do you like talking to people? Do you like the sales element? Do you like the numbers side of things? And, focus on what you're good at. And if there's something that you're not, or you see that you're lacking, either get someone in there to do that for you or partner with someone who has complementary skill set, things like that.
No, I think that's critical. And, I love what you said. Like, in any business journey, you're going to be spending a lot of time in your business. And if you don't love your business, you're not going to be a pleasant person. Like, a lot of people, eventually entrepreneurship leads to financial freedom, right? Where you can separate your time from your money. But in the beginning, at least during the onset, you're going to be working more than the traditional employee. Yeah. And if you're not passionate about what you're doing, or if you're only just driven by the money, I think that's going to lead to poor service and poor relationships in your life. Would you agree?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because like I said, if you're doing this more than you're going to be doing anything else, so you have to have that passion, And it's I guess a business might be a good analogy would be, if a painter is making a painting, and you see him throwing some streaks across the canvas, and it doesn't really mean anything until eventually it starts to come together and take shape. But people see the finished product and they think, wow, that's amazing, but they don't see the work that went into it beforehand, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people nowadays, especially, I feel like we're in a culture of instant gratification where people just say, I'm going to open up my shop tomorrow, I'm going to make $1 million, and I'm going to retire the day after. But it doesn't work that way at all,
No. I know it's this very cliche, but it's really about the journey. Like the journey is what teaches you all the things that make you a successful entrepreneur. I'm sure there were things that happened during your first business, your second business that you now use as critical skills that are helping you run your current business, right?
Absolutely. And I think, you always have, I think as you go through life, your perspective or your goals change, right? Maybe when you're younger, you say, I want to save up some money, so I have some money behind me. As you start to get the money, you say, I want the freedom of schedule a bit more, so I want to be entrepreneurial. And then eventually you start getting your mind towards, maybe I can retire early, maybe I can free up my time a little bit more, where, time becomes more valuable than money, right?
Yeah.
And so really whatever your objective is at that particular stage of life, you have to work towards it. But you do need to stop and think about what that is, because again, like another person that I was, when I was working for that law firm, the lawyer had more than enough money than what he needed. And he never did anything. He would get to the office at 6 a.m. He'd be there at 7 p.m, and he never spent his money on anything. And I went to him at one point and I said, why don't you hire someone to do some stuff for you? Why don't you do things you enjoy? Why don't you go on vacations? Why don't you go, take up a hobby or something? And he said, I go, because you have more than enough money than what you need. And he said, no, you'll see, if you ever have as much money as me, you'll realize it's never enough. And I said, this guy has completely lost sight, because, if you have more than what you need, even for his family, for his kids, wouldn't you want to do things that are a little bit more liberating, things that you kind of enjoy yourself, take a step back a little bit, but...
That's a sad mentality, unfortunately. We're going to wrap up soon, but I just wanted to ask a couple more questions. We talked about being a business person first and service provider second. What are some strategies or books or any type of things that can help you become a business owner first and service provider second?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it wasn't a particular book, but I will say that over time, I would look into a bunch of things. I like to read, but personally, when I'm reading, I don't like to read something where someone is telling me this is the blueprint and do it. I like to read more about the underlying elements and then draw my own conclusions. So, for example, I did take the Canadian securities course, which was just kind of a baseline introduction to different concepts of stock trading, things like that. I found it interesting. It didn't tell me though, buy this stock today because it's going to do well. I prefer a book that's going to say these are how you read, candlestick charts, or this is how you look at trends, or this is the typical time of trends. And so when I started my business, as well through a lot of my investments, because I do quite a bit of investing, I'll usually look at the trends. I'll look at things that are kind of predictive. So not that this stock, for example, this stock is worth a lot today, let me buy it. But no, I think this stock is going to be worth more a year from now for these reasons. And, trusting my own analysis just by, reading about, strategies, techniques, I would come to my own conclusions rather than being told by someone. I think it's important for everyone to do that. I think you need to do that yourself.
I think a lot of people are just looking for the blueprint, like you said, but if you focus on the foundational stuff, how to run a successful business, how to navigate through tough times, how to make your business lean if you need to, how to do this, how to do that. If you learn all of that, when that situation comes up, you're going to be well prepared, right? And I'm sure that's what you experienced.
Yeah, and talk to your clients. They're there, you know. At the end of the transaction, say, how did everything go? You know, were you happy with everything? You know, is there something we could have done better? Because your clients will talk to you, you know, they'll tell you, yeah, you know, everything was great, or, you know, I think you guys could have been a little bit faster, or whatever, right?
Whatever it is, yeah.
But talk to them because they're the ones who are getting your services and you can benefit from listening to them.
Perfect. So I'll wrap it up with one final question that I'd like to ask all my guests. If you could do it all over again, how would you do it differently?
Honestly, I think I would probably have started my own business sooner. It is financially scary from your own personal finance perspective, but once I actually got into it, I regretted not doing it sooner. That's the honest truth.
Yeah, and I love that. I wish I got into my business sooner as well, because that's just more money and more relationships and just more success that you've kind of left behind, right? Mm-hmm. This was great. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Matthew. Before we let you go, where can people find you and how can people work with you?
Yeah, so our website is aprlawyers.ca. On there, you'll have information for our website, my email, my assistant's email. Usually what I do is if someone wants to work with me, they can send me over an email with the APS, confirm that they want to work with us, provide that information to either their realtor or their mortgage agent, and then we take it from there.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thanks again for being on the show, guys. I will put all of his information below the episode. Please feel free to follow them on Instagram and work with them for any of your real estate law needs. Thanks again.
Thank you. Appreciate it.